Showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
I want to welcome you guys out today to episode 179 of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. My name is Chris Hollifield. I am your host. Welcome to the show. Welcome, new listeners, those of you that might have just stumbled upon the podcast, and welcome back to our longtime listeners, those of you that have been here for the past couple years, and join me episode after episode as I chat with people here in Salt Lake City, find out their story, find out what they're doing to help make Salt Lake City the city that it is today. Hey, this episode, I have an opportunity to chat with Christopher James. I have an opportunity to go to his apartment, sit down and chat, do some catching up with him. You might remember him from episode 140. That was the first time he was on the podcast. Well, in this episode, we chat about his podcast in Movie Nerds We Trust. We talk about a live podcast recording that he's doing August 2nd at Sandy Station. It was also just a lovely conversation as we catch up with him. Hey, listen, on July 27th, July 28th, and 29th, I'm going to be part of a really fun project with CenturyLink as they do acts of good around Salt Lake City, as they unroll gig speed internet here in Salt Lake City. And I'm going to be out and about in a green Camaro. We're going to do acts of good for things around the community like local education, local government, small business. You're going to want to make sure to follow me on Twitter at I Am Salt Lake. Connect with me on Facebook at I Am Salt Lake. And that way you can stay up to date as I'm out and about and the things we're doing. I'm going to be posting all kinds of pictures for that and letting you all know where you can find me. So again, connect with me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever social media outlets you use. Like I mentioned, Christopher James is on this episode. I have an awesome conversation with him. All the links are at iamsaltlake.com. That's where you can connect with him. You can connect with me. You can find out more about the live podcast he's doing August 2nd at Sandy Station. So with that being said, I'm going to quit chatting, and why don't you guys join me now as I talk to Christopher James in his apartment here in Salt Lake City, Utah. You know, so it's funny, actually, the last time I had you on the podcast, I actually listened to that episode today.
Oh, yeah? I haven't listened to it in a while.
Get a little refreshed. It was episode 140, April of 2014. Okay, so I know it doesn't seem like that because this is going to be, I think, episode 179, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, yeah.
So it's not that many episodes ago, but it was a while ago because I took a break shortly after having you on the show. And multiple people asked me, they said, was it the Christopher James episode that made me quit podcasting? And it wasn't. So I wanted to publicly announce that wasn't what made me take a break from doing the podcast.
And I thought I had a good reception on that episode.
Oh, it was one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it immensely.
It's just me as a person is what it is, I guess.
I found out a lot about you, and I felt like we developed a friendship.
We did.
I knew nothing about you before that. But I was able to scratch or take one of the things off your bucket list.
That's right.
How is the bucket list going for you?
Oh, man. So if we go from last time I was on, I had maybe 1 or 2. I'm at like 11 now.
1 or 2 things done.
Yeah.
Off the bucket list.
Yeah.
One of them being on a podcast.
Yeah, I think number 49, I believe.
And if I'm not mistaken, you were actually on a few podcasts after mine even. I remember listening, you were on the Paul DeWayne show.
Yeah, that was fun.
And so you're head first into the podcast world.
I've been slutting around on podcasts ever since. You will always be my first. I'll never forget my first.
Well, much appreciated. I definitely remember my first as well. First podcast I was on, at least. The biggest reason I'm here, though, I want to catch up with you, but let's start off right off the bat. You're going to be doing a live podcast.
Oh, yeah.
August 2nd. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Give the details of that.
So, since last year, I've become such a narcissist that I have to do big things for my birthday. The real story behind that is growing up and a lot into my 20s. I usually just did nothing for my birthday. by myself, nothing, maybe one or two friends. So with last year, I did the roast. And then this year, I'm like, got a podcast, should do a live episode. So what I'm doing with this is it's The Shames of Christopher James. I'm going to do movies that I'm ashamed to admit that I love. And I'm bringing some past guests on to, go through each of the movies. And then I'm also going to bring some past guests to do a comedy show portion of it, too. And it's going to be at Sandy Station.
What time does it start?
6, and then it's over at 9.
So, okay, so let's actually run, and I actually want to pick your brain about your podcast, obviously,
sure.
After we kind of talk about the live show. What's the schedule like? You're going to start with the podcast, you're going to start with comedy, or is it kind of a mixture of both?
So we're going to start the podcast. The first 2 hours is going to be the podcast. Usually on the podcast, I do 3 movies based on a theme. Since this is a live
what's
episode.
the name? Did you say the name of your podcast, by the way?
Oh, yeah, in Movie Nerds We Trust.
Okay. So
it's a mouthful, but it's enjoyable. Much like me. That is horrible. Scratch that from the record. That is not true. No, I'm just kidding. It's in Movie Nerds We Trust.
Okay, so you're going to start at 6 o'clock?
Yeah, we're going to start at 6 o'clock, and then we're going to do 2 hours for the podcast. Usually, as you know, as a past guest.
I think, was it episode 4?
Episode 4, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a fun episode, too, by the way.
Yeah.
Talking about Ghostbusters and Edward Scissorhands and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures.
3 of my favorite movies.
Yeah, that was a fun time. You got lost on the way here. We had that little fun story.
I went to your neighbor's house.
Oh, yeah.
But so anyway, back to the live show.
So usually I have one guest for the podcast, but for each of the 4 movies I'm going to do, I'm bringing past guests. So I'm going to have Melissa Merlot, Stephen Reed, Dustin Hagen, and Kat Palmer for the podcast portion. And I'm going to have some random past guests making some hilarious cameos. And then for the comedy portion, I'm having Jason Harvey, Natasha Maurer, Aaron Olovitz, Jackson Banks, and Nicholas Don Smith headlining.
So they'll be headlining the show.
Yeah,
they'll be doing some comedy after, or who's doing the comedy?
So Jason Harvey, Aaron Olovitz, Natasha Maurer, Jackson Banks, and Nicholas Don Smith headlining. They're going to do it after the podcast. So we're going to have a nice 2-hour podcast, some craziness and insanity, and after that we're going to have a hour comedy show. Nicholas is going to do about 15 minutes, good old chunk of headline. So,
and is it like what's the admission? What's it like? I
think it's like $5. I think we're going to do $5 for it.
Okay.
Might give away some prizes, some movie prizes, stuff like that. I got a lot of fun things planned for it. I'm really stoked for it.
I'm excited, and I'm excited for you because we actually were talking about you doing the podcast in episode 140.
Oh yeah, that's right.
When you were on the show before this, obviously. When did you start your podcast? I mean, you didn't start it that long ago.
January 17th was our first episode.
January 17th, because I know you did a lot of preparation. You were studying podcasts. I know you were sending me a lot of messages, trying to figure out how to do it.
And you were a great teacher.
Well, thank you.
One of the reasons why I have a great podcast.
I'd like to believe I'm a great teacher, but
yeah, definitely.
No. But so you started your podcast. You started in Movie Nerds We Trust. Talk about that. I mean, what was the hardest thing about getting it off the ground for you?
I think one of the hardest things about getting it off the ground was finding a co-host. That took a little bit longer than I thought it was going to take. I had a couple people lined up, some things happened, and I eventually had to go ahead and start auditioning people to be a co-host. So I put on Facebook, I put a post looking for someone it's like a Utah Film Network Facebook, and I got a few people. The person I ended up choosing, which is my co-host now, was the only person I auditioned because she impressed me so much that I couldn't see anybody else after that.
It's tough to get somebody that's going to be committed, that's good, that you have a chemistry with.
Yeah.
Who's your co-host now?
Quincy Staker. She's a local actress, so she does a lot of acting around town. She's really great. She knows her shit. I was impressed with her. We did a mock kind of podcast episode for her audition. We kind of talked about Death to Smoochie and a couple other movies, which we had on our first episode. And after it, I was like, she's it. I don't need to see anybody else. I had someone else lined up, but that person had already kind of flaked. So I'm like, Quincy's the one. And oddly enough, Quincy and I kind of have a history. She auditioned for this failed attempt of a movie that I tried 5 years ago. And
a movie that you tried to
make. Yeah.
What was the movie?
It was a call center comedy.
I think you were talking about it back in episode 140.
Yeah. It was, I wrote the script like forever ago. Maybe it was like probably like 6 or 7 years now that I think about it. And I was really stoked about it. So I got some people together, and the guy I was working with at the time had a friend who's had a big house to hold the auditions at. So I held the auditions there. And when me and Quincy talked after the interview, she's like, "Oh yeah, didn't you do a like a call center audition?" And sure enough, I'm like, "Oh yeah." And I kept like all the headshots from back then, in case I wanted to start it up again. And there she was, like, in the pile of headshots that I had. So it was weird. It's still kind of weird how that happens.
Have you ever done a episode by yourself, or they've always been with Quincy?
They've always been with Quincy on most parts. There are times when she's not available, or she was like on a film shoot, like she did Film Quest stuff for a couple weeks. So I would have a couple of guest co-hosts, like Dustin Hagen. I had Jason Harvey be a guest co-host when our buddy Mateen Stewart was in town. So I'll occasionally have some guest co-hosts if something comes up with Quincy. She had an episode without me for a ladies' night kind of episode.
I remember that one.
Yeah, and that was really great.
Wasn't that with who is that with?
Natasha Maurer, Eileen Dobbins, Melissa Merlot, and one of Quincy's friends. I think her name was Kristen.
Oh, and, wasn't it from the Hello Sweetie? No. Not from no.
No, it's just one of her random friends. And that was a great episode. So I know that's something Quincy wants to do again soon is that. But for the majority of it, I would say it'd be me and her. But there are times when I had guest hosts, and there's times, of course, when she did the episode by herself.
Well, the reason I ask is because I was wondering, doing it by yourself versus having a co-host. If you've noticed a difference, but it sounds like you've never done it solo, just one-on-one. You've had multiple people on the show. We
did one episode where it's just me and her. We actually had somebody cancel. So we ended up doing an episode. It's called Franchise Failures. So we talked about like Batman and Robin. And as you know from the podcast, we get really distracted. And there's quite a bit of parts in there with me and her just doing Bane voice. And we're like, we have to stop. No one's going to listen to this. And it ended up being a lot of fun. So we turned the night to where we had someone flake out as a guest into a really fun episode.
How many episodes? You've done like close to 30, haven't you?
We did number 30 last week.
Last week?
Yeah, number 30, Rage Cage. We did angry Nicolas Cage movies.
So is that like an episode a week, or have you done multiples in a week, or how many?
There have been times like towards the beginning we did like with you. I think we in that week that you're doing it, and the week after we did 2 to 3 a week just to get a nice bulk of episodes going. And then there'll be times to where I have someone who's coming in town who's a friend, and they want to go ahead and do the podcast, so I end up doing 2 a week in situations like that. But we usually just aim for like 1 a week.
Do you have like a release day, or you just kind of do it when you can do it?
Yeah, usually like Friday. Thursday's when we record. Friday's when we'll release it. But if there's scheduling things, we'll probably release it on a different day. But it's always going to be out the day after we record.
Yeah.
So I never edit. I just full on, have everything that we record. I'll tweak the audio a little bit so it sounds better. But other than that, I don't edit. I don't cut anything out.
Well, your audio is great on it. I mean, that was one of the things I was impressed with it.
Well, thank you,
in the beginning. You started off with a bang. I mean, I know like when I started this podcast, I didn't know what I was doing. I know I mentioned it in previous episodes. I recorded like the first 3 on my iPhone, and the audio is horrible. And I'm pretty close to taking those offline. So if you want to listen, go back and take a listen before they're taken down. But no, what's been the hardest thing with doing a podcast? Like because I see things that I've done. It's close to 3 years with I Am Salt Lake.
Oh,
so
shit.
I've had a lot of obstacles and different things where I wanted to throw the towel in and say, fuck it, just get rid of it and not do it anymore. But what's the hardest thing for you doing a podcast, do you think?
I think it's scheduling sometimes. Sometimes that's the hardest. Sometimes one of the hardest things for me is coming up with episode title that's catchy. Because I like to have like a witty like episode title.
That's your hardest thing is coming up with an episode title.
One of the things. And scheduling it. I'm not a big fan of people that flake. So
it's tough.
I hate last minute shit like that. That's tough too. Sometimes just like scheduling out. I'm very thankful and blessed to have like a really good amount of like talented and amazing friends such as yourself that all at once wanted to like do the podcast. So I would say when I started, I had maybe like 40 people wanting to be on it. So I was like, oh shit, I gotta scramble, figure out a way to schedule things like precisely. I had to find a rhythm so it wasn't overwhelming at times. And now I've got a pretty good rhythm, and it's not as hard anymore, but there's still some tough times with it. Sometimes it's, oh, I may have double booked it, or I'm going to have to do 2 a week. How am I going to, incorporate comedy and the other stuff that I do and schedule that out? I would say, honestly, scheduling is probably like the biggest like hurdle that I've had since I've done it.
Don't you notice now by doing a podcast, you listen to other podcasts and you have a little more respect for them, and like, man, they go through it. It's a lot of work. A lot of times you don't get a lot of feedback always, and a lot of
well, one thing I did like when I first listened to podcasts is I always kind of wondered what was on the other end of the audio, like how their setup was. How were other things going, like what it was like on their end, kind of like a visual aspect. Now that I do it, I can only imagine like how the setup could be. I mean, mine's in my apartment. I do mine in my apartment, in my living room. And there's some podcasts I've heard that do, like Mark Maron's, he does it out of his garage.
Yeah.
There's some people who have nice studios and stuff like that, but I definitely have an appreciation for it. There's a lot that goes into podcasting, which is probably why it took so long to learn everything I could, from you and like a lot of other great people that gave me really awesome advice. And I think that's probably why it sounds as good right off the bat. Is I got some really good advice from Chip and Jay from the Chip and Jay Show.
Where are those guys actually? Have you talked to them?
I haven't heard from them in a while.
Have they been on your podcast?
Not yet. I want them to.
Well, because I know I was in messaging back and forth with Chip, and I think they were talking about doing a new show, and I haven't talked to them for a while. I was just wondering if you've talked to them.
I haven't either. I saw some like graphic with like 50-50 like podcasts.
Okay.
And I've been looking for it, but I haven't found it anywhere. So I don't know. Like they're like ghosts. But
it's easy to disappear in the podcast.
Oh yeah.
It's you just kind of stop doing it. Shop.
It was, they gave like the Kai EIE thing that I use. You've seen it, the red kind of interface, like it's a steel box.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they were the ones who told me to use that. They said the best interface you can get is at a Kai EIE. So that's the most expensive thing that I purchased for the podcast was that. And oddly enough, I don't even think I've told you this story. To get the rest of the equipment, I did kind of a random acting gig. I did it in like December for a Kickstarter video. It got me like $150 so I could buy mics and mic stands and stuff. But so in that video, I'll have to send you a link. I pour a whole bottle of Gold Bond powder down my underpants. I have chestnuts glued to my back. I don't say anything in this thing. I just look like a big fat dumb idiot. It's crazy, but it was a lot of fun. It took like 16 hours to film, but if I never would have done that, I probably wouldn't have started the podcast as soon as I did.
Yeah. Okay, here's a question for you. Being a podcaster, I was, I look back over the last few years and in different opportunities, different things that have happened because of my podcast. Has your podcast opened up any doors? Have there been things that you've been able to experience or people you've been able to meet because of doing your podcast?
I haven't say like I have like the opportunity to meet people because of the podcast yet, but I kind of have that nice reception from people.
Yeah.
Like I'll go to open mic and they'll be like, "Hey, I heard the new episode and it was hilarious. I loved when this happened," and stuff like that. So that's a little different. I mean, you get that kind of reception from comedy, but with the podcast, it's hard to know like what the reception is, unless you're going off numbers and stuff. But I've talked to people who I'm, fingers crossed might be on the podcast in the future. I went to a comedy show at the State Room when a comedian was in town and talked to him after. He said he was interested. So we'll see.
Yeah.
If that's the case, yeah, but I think the podcast is still, at that uphill kind of like, climbing that mountain, so to speak, to people to get to know it more. But I feel like it's getting a good buzz with it.
And it's on iTunes and Stitcher Radio.
Yeah,
right?
iTunes and Stitcher.
So people listening to check it out, and is there a website you have for it or no website?
Oh no, I just have like my Facebook and Twitter for it.
Yeah,
and I want to get a website set up eventually, but I think I'm waiting until I get to a good bulk amount of episodes and maybe do a website.
So the live show on August 2nd.
Yeah.
Anything else in store for the podcast that you want to mention, or is that kind of your big hoopla right now? Is the live show?
The live episode, I'm in the works of hopefully getting my first celebrity guest. I had one almost.
Well, you had me on there already.
Well, that's true. That's true. My first out of town celebrity. There we go. I've already had plenty of celebrity. You're my first local celebrity. There you go. Hopefully that, but, honestly, the live episode is probably the biggest thing that we're going to have going on pretty soon. Yeah. And I'm really excited for that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
In episode 140 that you were on, you were talking about your relationship with your dad. How's that going?
Good. I haven't got to see him like in a couple of years, but
so you haven't you didn't go out and visit him since we've been.
No, I haven't. Unfortunately, I haven't got a chance to. Like work stuff got in the way, and then now with like comedy and podcast stuff, that got in the way. But he's been like he got a new job like where he lives, so he's been really busy with that. So we've been both like trying to coordinate schedules for me to fly out there. But he's still a great supporter of me. Yeah. He's listened to a couple episodes of podcasts. He says he's pretty impressed, with it. He doesn't really know how like that stuff works.
He's like, listen, guys, my son's on the radio. It's awesome.
You know what fucking gets you? A kid that does shit like this. This is what happens.
I kind of want to change pace, I'm sure you've listened to a few episodes when I've had, returning people on the show and some questions. To continue to get to know Christopher James, and I don't want to get into too much of your past. People can listen to 140, which
sure.
I'll put the link up for this. But so a few questions I'm going to ask. I don't know if I asked, what's your all-time favorite movie?
All-time favorite movie? It's tough, but it's a tie between Death to Smoochie, which is probably one of the best dark comedies with Robin Williams, or Orgasmo. It's actually with Matt Stone and Trey Parker.
Yeah, I love Orgasmo.
Yeah, it's actually one of the reasons why I put those on the first episode is because I love Death to Smoochie and I love Orgasmo. We also had Hamlet 2 on that episode, which is another fantastic movie. But if I'm going to go to the top, because I love comedy, I love dark comedy, I'd have to go Death to Smoochie on that one.
When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I had like a plethora of things I wanted to be when I was a kid. I remember being 4 and saying I wanted to be a scientist because they make a lot of money, which, we all know Bill Nye is probably still broke, so that's not true. I knew for a long time I wanted to be like something involved with movies. I wanted to do something either write or act. I remember when I was a teenager and trying to like get into acting gigs and got an agent and went out on a couple auditions, but that wasn't really what I enjoyed. I always wanted to be a writer of sorts too. I think as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to impact the world in a positive way. Inspire people in ways that people have inspired me. So whether it be comedy or the podcast or, my book and things like that, it's something that revolves around that. But I've always, from as long as I can remember, wanted to be something involved movie-wise.
What's the biggest personal change you've ever made?
Biggest personal change? Ugh, that is tough. That is a tough question. Personal change. I feel like I've changed a lot. Like, I feel like people say this, and I don't want to feel like a cliche, but I feel that after my whole attempted suicide thing, I feel like a different person. I feel like I got a lot of clarity, and, I see things differently now.
And I remember you vaguely talked about that in the episode you were on before, but was it what got you through that?
What helped me get over it and kind of
to be able to say, you know what, life's cool. I want to keep kicking and wake up and what helped you get through that?
Oddly enough, it was a podcast.
Really?
Yeah.
What podcast?
Kevin Smith has. When I was going through that, someone suggested that I listen to podcasts, to kind of cheer me up. And the only person I could think of that I wanted to listen to was Kevin Smith. So I downloaded a couple of his podcasts, and he told a story about his friend who was really close to the edge and was about ready to jump off, but, for some reason he couldn't do it. He kind of pulled himself back and kind of got his life back together and realized he needed to, move forward instead of, move back. And kind of like that popped into my head when that was going on. Also just, thinking of, all the people I was going to leave behind, because I was writing, notes and stuff to people, and as I wrote each note, I was thinking I could imagine what it's going to be like for them reading that. That horrible experience. That, and then, once I just, that night, I just cried for hours. Once I realized I was, not going to do it. And I think just, talking to people about it afterwards, being honest, I had to tell my family, months later, I hate to tell you this, but a few months ago, I almost committed suicide, and here's why. And I had to explain that to them. And I think telling them...
What was their reaction?
Shock. I've always been a cheerful person, but I think, like anybody, everybody's got their demons, and that situation affected me more than I would have liked it to, but it was more shock. My mom was sad and angry, and my sisters were upset. It's because they realized they couldn't see the world without me. It's weird to even think what the world would be like without someone on the planet.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm glad.
If you ever get like that, give me a call. No, I'm serious. Just give me a call anytime.
I promise you, I am 100% happy, but I'm just going to call you anyways.
Yeah.
To see how you're doing.
Yeah, just give me a call.
I miss that beard. I miss it so much.
Have you ever been in a fist fight?
Oh, yeah, many times.
Many times?
Yeah.
One of them. What's the craziest one?
I got bullied a lot when I was a kid. I had a lot of child abuse from stepfathers, and one time I stood up for myself and hit him back. I mean,
one of your stepfathers?
Yeah.
Really? Where'd you hit him?
Oh, right in his fucking face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make him bleed?
No, it was more of a, hit him in the jaw and kind of surprised him and knocked him back a little bit. I was only 9 or 10, so
you were a badass.
Oh no, back then. I really let people walk all over me. I would say I didn't have people stop walking all over me till my early 20s.
What made you decide to not have people walk all over you? I mean, you have to get to that point, though. What your confidence levels or
it's kind of when you realize that every time someone walks all over you, a little piece of you dies inside, to the point where you're just a hollow husk of a person, Eventually you are just a doormat. You're an inanimate object that people can continuously walk all over for comfort,
Have you been in a fist fight in your adult years?
I haven't been in a fist fight in a really long time. You ever get you're a man, you know how it is. You get that testosterone. You kind of see somebody I feel like I could beat the shit out of that guy. I'm ready,
I have friends that we'd go to we'll go to a bar and they'll just be like, let's get in a fight tonight.
Yeah.
I'll just be like, what are we, 10? I mean, come on,
Oh, I'll never do it, but I feel like I get that manly testosterone. I haven't hit somebody in a while. I wonder what that feels like. Does it feel great? It's like not having sex for a while. It's I miss it. Maybe if I do it, I'll feel better. Nah, well, it was okay. There's some regrets, but I enjoyed my time.
Oh, man. Let's say you could be an extra on any TV show of your choice. What TV show?
Any TV show of my choice.
What TV show would you choose?
An extra.
Yeah.
It's tough. I do like a lot of TV shows. Honestly, if I were to be an extra on any TV show, I would go, if I was going to go recent, we'll do this. I'll go recent and then I'll go past show that's non-existent anymore. Recent, I would love to be an extra and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Love that show. That or SNL. I love
an extra on, like just somebody in the audience.
Yeah, like in a skit or, maybe, even, unfortunately The Office isn't on anymore, but if I was going to go like a past show, one show that I've always loved growing up was Third Rock from the Sun. I would have loved to be an extra.
It was such a horrible show, but it was so good at the same time.
It was good. It's hilarious. There's so much, random, like watching that as I got older, like watching it now, it's like, wow, there's a lot of fucked up references in here.
Let's say you could have any pet.
Any pet.
Any pet you wanted. What pet would Christopher James have?
This is going to sound really weird, but ever since I was a kid, I always wanted a chimp, like a chimpanzee I can dress in the same outfits as me, and we can go out and have adventures.
We'll leave that there. What's the longest plane ride you've ever been on?
Longest plane ride? Probably like 3 hours. I haven't been on that many plane trips, to be honest.
Yeah.
The only places I've flown to have been Texas, or I went to San Francisco recently for work, and that was only like an hour and a half.
Was that the first time you've ever been to San Francisco?
Yeah.
What do you think of it? What do you think of San Francisco?
I loved it. Like, it's a lot of great culture there. I was only there for a day. I went for like a work thing and got a little tipsy at the work party. So it's nothing.
I don't picture you as a big drinker.
I don't really drink that much, but when I do, there's a person that comes out of me. I like to call him Weekend James. He is my alternative party persona.
What's your drink of choice?
I always drink AMFs or beer.
They're both sides of this.
Yeah.
Like a Bud Light kind of beer, or do you like to get some kind of microbrew, like some kind of...
I kind of like the wheat ales, like Blue Moon is really good.
Okay.
Isn't it, is it the Squatters, or is that the one that has a sun on it?
Oh, Shock Top.
Shock Top, yes.
Yeah.
I like those. Bud Light's still good, too. I like that. It's a classic.
Well, you could, they say you could tell a lot about somebody by what they drink.
Sure.
And if you could learn to play any instrument, what instrument would you learn to play?
I've always wanted to try to play the guitar, but every time I try to learn, I get very frustrated. I can't really do it. It's not my wheelhouse. Like, I'm not a musical person. Like, but if I could learn it, I would say guitar. I feel guitar it'd be nice to kind of, feel like a badass riffing, just riffing those guitar chords in front of people.
Do you play any instruments now?
No, I don't. I gave up trying music stuff for a long time.
Just comedy and podcasts.
Comedy, podcasts, movie obsessions, failed attempts with the ladies. That doesn't hurt my confidence.
How's that going for you?
It's okay, I guess. It's not bad. I don't really try too much. I just kind of let it happen, So, let a chance encounter, if I meet some girl, say at the top of the Empire State Building on Valentine's Day, sure, but that won't happen because that is a Tom Hanks movie. No, I kind of, if I meet people and I see that spark, sure. I feel like last year was really kind of pursuing it. And, if you try too hard, you're trying for a relationship, never happens. But when you're just kind of relaxing,
when you don't want it, or not when you're not looking for it,
yeah,
it happens.
Yeah,
that's what they say, at least. Right?
I still feel like that's kind of bullshit, but I'm still in that moment, in that medium kind of place to where it's nothing's happened yet. I'm not really trying, but I have no results from it.
What's your most memorable concert or sporting event?
Memorable concert. Oh God, this is going to be embarrassing. The very first concert I went to was Kenny Loggins. I did not pay for it. It was free. It was on my birthday. Yeah, I see you holding back your laugh. I can see your beard quivering. with
No,
laughter.
that's pretty badass, actually.
No,
Kenny Loggins. Where was that at?
It was at the Peppermill, and my buddy's mom got it for free, so we went out there. So I kind of heard this guy's songs. What happened was I was a little tipsy. Sure, I had a couple of beers. I was 22, was still into the drinking, still getting used to it. So, see, I don't even want to continue because I'm revealing way too much about myself. I'm just joking.
Kenny Loggins.
So all these like middle-aged women are pawing at him and going nuts, and then the music cuts, and I didn't know the music was going to cut, and I yelled, "Geez, I've never seen older women move that fast." And because he was walking down the aisles, and him and about like 10 women looked at me, and I was like, "Sorry." He just went back to it, but it was pretty embarrassing.
Have you seen any concerts since that kind of redeem yourself from Kenny Loggins?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
I think like I went to go see like Shiny Toy Guns at the U once. Like they had a little concert there, but it was really small. I've never got that huge concert experience. Like I've never had that.
Well, you're still young. You still have time to get out there. Let's say you could try out for any job for a day, or not try out, but if you could have any job for a day,
Okay.
what job would you like to have? Like you were automatically going to be good at it, and you could go do it for one day.
I would say either writing or directing for a TV or a movie.
Not any more adventurous than I'm letting you try any job.
It's my passion.
Like I'd be a male stripper or something.
Really?
Like
For
that.
a day?
Yeah, just for
you
one
magic
day.
mic it?
Yeah, just
All right.
just because it's like, okay, I can go do it for one day. I'm going to be awesome at it.
Try it out. Stand up, take your clothes off. Let's put some music on.
No.
If I don't know, like it's tough. There's all these things I've always wanted to do. I've got a book of things I've always wanted to do. If I was going to do something for one day just to see what it would be like, I'd be a king. Just be a king. You know?
See, now I'm liking your style.
Yeah.
here.
Pull a John Goodman, King Ralph. You know, try it out.
That was a good movie.
Yeah.
Have you talked that movie on your podcast?
I have not yet. I
You should do a John Goodman.
Oh.
Have you done a John Goodman episode?
I haven't. There you go. Johnny B. Goodman.
Yeah,
there we go.
Johnny B. Goodman.
Look at this. Clever titles already happening.
Yeah, are you still getting up and doing some stand-up comedy?
Yeah.
Are you still getting up regularly, or like if people come out, maybe on open mics or?
Yeah, I'll go to open mics. I did a couple shows. I want to say in June I did one of the K-Town shows. Maybe it was earlier than that, May or June. I did that. I had a great show at that one. Kicked ass at that one. I think the last show I did was at Kean Clark's house for Dustin Hagen's birthday. He had a few of us comedians.
That was a few weeks ago. Right?
Yeah, yeah. That's the last show I was on, but I've been doing open mics here and there. Dustin Hagen actually one the very first guest that I had on the podcast.
Right on.
Yeah, do you ever go back and listen to like your early ones? Like I listened to the very first one the other day.
Occasionally I will. Usually like how I knew I was going to talk to you again. I went back and listened to your episode, and like if I have people return, I try to go back and listen. It's tough. I listen to so many podcasts.
Yeah.
I've cut back a lot just because I like to stay up on them. So I don't listen to as many as I used to, but by the time I listen to all those, and I like to read, and I like to, everything else I do, it's hard to go back and listen to 180 episodes here, Christopher.
Yeah, that's true. I hope to get to your godlike status of podcasting.
Have you discovered any new podcasts? Any new podcasts? I know we talked a little bit about that in episode 140. Any new ones that you care to talk about?
Oh wow! Actually, I think now I got to pull up the list, much like I did on that one. What has Christopher James been listening to lately? Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal Podcast.
I didn't even know he had a podcast.
Yeah, it's fucking hilarious.
Really?
I won't even know most of the guests on there, and I'll just do it. He'll be like, "So, who do you remember when that person sucked that dick and threw apple slices at some extra's asshole?" That's the most horrible Gilbert Gottfried ever, but I feel like I nailed it. I'm a little confident, probably overly confident. I'll never try it again. I still, You Made It Weird. I still listen to that. Got to meet Pete Holmes last time he was in town.
He's coming again.
Yeah.
Right, in a few months.
Yeah, October.
You gonna go?
Oh, definitely.
Can I sit by you?
Of course.
Yeah, well, it's a date.
He's on the good old wall of narcissism, as I like to call it. I always joke about that on my podcast. So I call it a wall of narcissism. It's just me and celebrities I met. It's kind of like a wall of inspiration to me in a way. There'll be times when maybe I'm not doing things or maybe I'm not doing as good, but I'll look at that and be like, this is something that I never thought I would ever accomplish. It's literally like one of my bucket lists is on my wall, is that wall of narcissism.
Every time you accomplish something, I mean, how do you feel?
I feel great.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, but just great. I mean, is that it? Or, I mean, is there any other feelings?
I feel fabtabulous. I feel wonderful.
I mean, I guess that's kind of a tough question.
No, it's not. No, I get what you mean.
Does it make you want to do more things?
Oh, yeah.
Does it make you want to, and not even so much goals. That's why I like your bucket list thing. You know, and I know I mentioned that before, but it's like, it just makes it so they're there, but it's not like, okay, I have to have this done by the end of the week. I have to have this done by the end of the month. Because they're tough. Goals are good and scheduling and to-do lists, but sometimes, I know I can start to kind of tear myself apart if I don't get things done. I'm like, oh, I didn't get everything on my to-do list done. I suck but.
I have this saying that accomplishment is the fuel of the fire of ambition. The more that you accomplish, the more ambitious you want to be. It's people always say, oh, I could do this and that, but when you have something that you accomplish and you can look back on it, it makes you want to create more of those experiences. It makes you want to feel more accomplishment. And to me, I kind of every time I cross something off or even do anything, I feel more of a person. I feel like more of a whole person.
Yeah.
Even the podcast, every episode I do, I feel that much more accomplishment. And I like to listen to it on iTunes. Do you do this? You'll listen to your own episodes on iTunes to see if they sound good on iTunes or Stitcher?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll do
I listen
that.
through different things. I'll listen through headphones. I'll listen in my car.
Yeah.
I'll listen through different speakers because they take on a different sound however you listen to it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think podcasts sound best with headphones.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Versus a car or like a boombox or something like that.
Do they still have boom boxes?
Well,
They might.
There's some photos we posted. Did you see the photos I posted of the boombox when I went out to the Salt Flats with Kat?
I think so. Yeah. Was someone standing on it?
She had a beatbox, a breakdance girl came out with a boombox to the Salt Flats. It was the raddest prop.
It's coming back to me.
Okay, yeah, because I know. Kat posted some on her Instagram, and then I posted some in mine.
Yeah,
and so go check them out on Instagram.
Oh yeah,
check them out. But
I have to. I haven't seen a boombox in probably 20 years in person. That's how sad. That's how old
I was
you feel.
excited when I saw it out at the Salt Flats. I was like, oh my! I felt like a 10-year-old child on Christmas morning. And I was like, I got to get some pictures of this. So anyway, yeah.
Oh, podcasts.
No, that's fine. I was just curious if there was any new podcasts you were listening to.
I'll listen to more local ones too. A lot of the comedians have been doing podcasts lately. Jason Harvey's Stupid Questions.
I love that podcast.
Him and Natasha Mauer doing Get Sandwich. Guy Seidel doing his Dirt Pod podcast is great. I haven't really, yours, of course, still listen to that. Still an active subscriber. I've been trying to discover more local podcasts. When I come across more, I tend to check them out. Dragon Comes to Zion, with Dustin Hagen, Stephen Reed. That's a great one.
I've never listened to that one. That's a local one?
Yeah, Dustin Hagen, Stephen Reed, and Alex Chimashov. They do that. It's like a once a month one. They just have a little round table of comedians, do current events. It's actually a great listen. I've been on that one too a couple times, and loved it.
Check that out. Yeah,
it's a good one. It's a good local one. I don't know, you're kind of a knower of podcasts locally. Do you listen to a lot of local ones too?
I not as much. Well, I listen to the Let's Go Eat show.
Oh, yeah, I still need to listen to
Bill
that.
Allred's Let's Go Eat Show. Occasionally, I'll listen to Slug Does a Podcast. I'll occasionally listen to their podcast. I'm trying to think, Guy Seidel's podcast. I love, and then Andy Gold's.
Yeah.
I don't think I know he hasn't done one for a minute, but I love his podcast. Trying to think when, pretty much the ones you mentioned, Jason Harvey's.
Yeah.
I think that's about it.
Him and Natasha Mauer's sketch sandwich, I would love. I can't wait for the next ones to come out.
Yeah.
Hilarious. And it's not just because, like, I have friends on there. They're my friends, and they have more of my friends on there, but it's genuinely, like, hilarious. I love improv. Like, improv's one of my fortes, so to speak.
Well, awesome. Remind August 2nd. Let's run down that list again. Let's run down August 2nd, Sandy Station.
Sandy Station.
I'm going to have you run down the list.
Okay. August 2nd, Sandy Station, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m.
So be on time.
Be on time, yes. Definitely be on time. You don't want to...
Bring a date.
Yep, why not?
Yeah.
I want the satisfaction of knowing that my podcast and the comedy show got somebody laid.
A baby was made that night.
Yes. I want generations of stories to be told about how a chubby comedian had a podcast, and that's how their parents fell in love. I feel it. So 6 to 9. Bring people, of course. We definitely, whether you're a long-time listener, first-time listener, it's going to be great. Usually what we do with the podcast, we have a theme in 3 movies. This theme is The Shame of Christopher James, which is me admitting to movies I am ashamed of. Instead of doing 3 movies, we're going to do 4. And I'm going to have Melissa Merlot, Kat Palmer, Stephen Reed, and Dustin Hagen as the guests for the podcast. And then after that, we're going to have a comedy show portion with Aaron Orlovitz, Jason Harvey, Natasha Mauer, Jackson Banks, and then headlining is going to be Nicholas Don Smith. So it's going to be not only a podcast and comedy within the podcast, but you get a comedy show too.
Well, and a lot of these people have actually been on episodes even of I Am Salt Lake. So if you want to get to know them, like Nicholas was on last week.
Great episode.
Podcast. And, Kat's been on a podcast. Jason Harvey, Natasha, Melissa. I've had a lot of these. So, if you want to get to know them a little bit better before you go to the movie night, go check out those episodes.
It's like the behind the music, but with podcasts, behind the podcast, Natasha Mauer.
Anything else you want to talk about before we close out the show here? Anything else you want to promote or any of other events you want to talk about? Or?
Well, of course, the podcast, you can find it on iTunes and Stitcher.
Yeah.
Facebook page was and Movie Nerds We Trust. Twitter is at Trust Your Nerds. And then we always say, if you have an idea for a theme or movies, they can email us at trustyourmovienerds@gmail. And then I'm setting up Indiegogo for the book, for the bucket list book.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And I try to get all the links. I don't always get them up, all the links up the day the podcast comes out, but I try to get all those links at iamsaltlake.com. So if people, you're driving your car and you can't write all that down or remember it, just go to the page for the Christopher James episode this number. And I appreciate you coming on. Any piece of advice or words of wisdom you want to leave with people?
Words of wisdom.
From Mr. James himself.
I would say the best word of wisdom I can say is, a dream is only a dream unless you make it real. So if you have something you're passionate about or something you always want to do it. That's the only way it's going to be, real, is go out there, grab the bull by the horns. I'm saying a lot of cliches, kids. I apologize. Just, go out there. I would say one of the best things I've done with my life is realize that I can go out there and do anything. Nothing's stopping me but me.
All right. Many thanks goes out to Christopher James for joining me on this episode of the podcast. Again, if you want to listen to the first time he was on the podcast, go to episode 140. Download that. It was a great conversation with him. I really enjoyed chatting with him. The friendship that I was able to create by having him on the podcast and keeping up with him and watching him create in Movie Nerds We Trust podcast. I was on episode 4 of that, so you're going to want to download that episode at least as well. Hey, I want to thank everybody for their continual support of I Am Salt Lake podcast. Hopefully you guys are telling your family and friends. Hopefully you're sharing your favorite episodes on social media. Share them on Facebook and Twitter. I do want to mention a recent iTunes review that I got here recently. I don't think I mentioned it on an episode of the podcast yet. We got it from our friend over at the Utah Foodie podcast, Chase Murdoch. He left, love Chris, love the podcast, love SLC. What more could I ask for? Great show. Thanks a lot, Chase Murdoch. Thank you so much for the iTunes review. That helps boost the ratings, gets the podcast exposed to more people. If you have not left an iTunes review, go to iamsaltlake.com, click the iTunes link. That'll send you right to iTunes. You can leave a review right there from your desktop computer. That helps the show in so many ways. You can also go to the website, click the donate button if you want to send on over $1 or $2. That helps keep the podcast moving forward. It helps with audio hosting, web hosting, helps just keep it moving forward. I want to give a quick thank you to a recent donation from Steve Kinslow. I want to thank him for the recent donation and his help with keeping the podcast moving forward. Hey, I'm here every week with a brand new episode. Make sure you're subscribed in however you listen to podcasts. Make sure you're connected with me on Twitter, connect with me on Facebook. That way you can stay up to date on everything podcast related, as well as the event I'm doing with CenturyLink, July 27th, 28th, and 29th. Keep an eye out on that. It's going to be a really good time. I'm going to be out and about in a green Camaro. I want to thank everybody for your continual support. And until then, get out and enjoy the city, buy local, and we'll catch you guys again next week.